Today we're going to start talking about subtracting mixed numbers, and we're going to start with 2 1/4 minus 3/4. Okay, and for this first one, we're going to go ahead and just draw a model just so that we can see how it's working and what's going on. So I know that I always put my holes with my holes and my parts with my parts, so I'm just going to go ahead and separate this. Here's my holes and here's my parts. Okay, and it says I have 2 1/4, so I'm going to draw 2 holes. And how many parts should be in each hole? I should have 4 parts in each hole because the denominator is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 3 lines in each one to have 4 parts. And then over here, I'm going to draw my parts. I'm going to go ahead and make this. I'm going to shade in both of these holes. Okay. And then I'm going to shade in 1/4 over here. Okay, so right now I have 2 right here and I have 1/4 right here. So I want to subtract 3/4. But wait a minute, I can't do that. Why can't I do that? I can't do it because there isn't 3/4 over there. So what I can do is I can borrow from this hole. I'm going to take this hole and I'm just going to get rid of it because I'm going to move it over here to the parts. Okay, so I'm going to move it over here. Now let's think about what I just did. I borrowed from the 2 and I made that a 1, and I just added a hole, but that hole was worth 4/4, right? So now how many fourths do I have right here? I have 5/4. Okay, so let's just look over here at our algorithm real quick, like where we're actually doing the math. Right here, I borrowed 2 from the 2 and I made that a 1. And I borrowed how much? I borrowed 4/4. So now how many fourths do I have? I have 5/4. Just like over here, right? So now can I actually subtract it? Yes, I can subtract 3/4. So I'm going to get rid of 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So what do I have left? Over here in the parts I have 2/4, and right here in the holes I have 1. Let's come back over here to where we're actually doing the math. 5/4 minus 3/4, I know my denominator stays 4, and 5 minus 3 is 2, and 1 minus nothing is 1. But wait, I'm not done. But wait, there's more. I can simplify this because I can see that this 2/4 that I have is like 1/2, right? So I can actually simplify that by dividing by 2, and I'm really dividing by 1 whole, right? So that's really going to equal 1 1/2. Okay, we're going to move on to another problem. Okay, I'm not going to make us do models this time, but we're going to do 15 3/5 minus 3 4/5. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and subtract my parts. Like I would, on a regular subtraction problem, I start on the right. So I know my denominator is 5, and I do 3 minus 4, but wait, I can't do 3 minus 4. Okay, so I'm going to have to borrow, just like when you're subtracting regularly, you have to borrow. So I'm going to borrow from 15, and the 15 is now going to become 14. I don't just make this a 13. I don't do that. No, 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 no. Because I didn't borrow 10, I borrowed a whole, which is how many make a whole? The denominator tells me that, and in this case it's 5. So I just borrowed 5/5. Okay? I already had 3/5 and I borrowed 5/5, and now how many fifths do I have? I have 8/5. Kind of writing that over top of it, but now I can subtract it. And yes, I realize I just made that improper, but I had to so that I could subtract it. And as long as you don't leave an improper fraction in your final answer, that's okay. You've got to do this. So 8 minus 4 is 4, and 14 minus 3, okay, 4 minus 3 is 1, 1 minus nothing is 1. So my answer is 11 4/5. Okay, now we're going to do another problem. I am going to do 12 and 1/4 minus 7 and 2/4. And I notice they have a common denominator. You're welcome for that. So we don't have to find the common denominator, of course, but I do need to go ahead and subtract 1/4 minus 2/4. So I go to do that, and I realize I can't, because I can't take 2 away from 1. But I know that when I do, my denominator is going to be 4, right? So I'm going to borrow from the 12 and make that an 11. And then I borrowed a whole, and a whole was worth how much? 4/4. Okay, so now how many fourths do I have? I had 1/4 and I just borrowed 4 more fourths. So now I have 5/4. Now I can subtract it. 5 minus 2 is 3. And now I've got 11 minus 7. And that is 4. So my answer is 4 3/4. Okay, we're going to do another one. Now I'm going to do 2 3/5 minus 1 1/2. Okay? Oh, Miss Schuler, you're so mean. You didn't give us common denominators. Yep, so now you're going to have to find a common denominator. So when you go to the side to do it, do me a favor and always write the whole number with it, because otherwise you're going to switch the fractions to make it where you can always subtract it. So always go ahead and write that with it. So I'm going to start finding my multiples of 5. Okay, and then right here, I'm going to go over here and find my multiples of 2. Oh, I see something they have in common. They have 10 in common. So let me figure out those numerators. This is 3, so that means 6. And then this is over here is 1, so I'm going to count my ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I'm going to have I have a new problem. Rewrite the new problem. Don't just try to come over here and just like write it over here to the side. Rewrite the problem. So now I have 2 6/10 minus 1 5/10. Okay, I know my denominator is 10, and can I do 6 minus 5? Yes, I can. That's going to be 1. And 2 minus 1 is 1. So my answer is 1 1/10. You're welcome. I did not make you do any borrowing on that one. I bet you can guess what problem is next. Our next problem, we're going to do 5 2/3 minus 4 5/6. Yep, I'm going to make you borrow and find a common denominator. So when I come over here to find my common denominator, make sure you write that whole number with it, because otherwise I know you'll end up switching the fractions around. And I'm going to start listing my multiples, and ding, 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 I found it. It's going to be 6, so that's going to make 4. So I have a new problem. My new problem that I'm going to write, I'm going to rewrite the problem, 5 4/6 minus 4 5/6. I know my denominator is going to be 6, so I need to do 4 minus 5. Wait, I can't do that, so what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to borrow. So the 5 becomes a 4, and I just borrowed how much? 6. 6/6. So now how many 6 do I have? I have 10/6. So now I can subtract it. 10 minus 5 is 5. And we already knew our denominator was going to be 6. And 4 minus 4 is just 0. So my answer is just 5/6. Not too bad. Let's do another one. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do 3 1/9 minus 1 1/3. Okay, I notice they do not have the same denominator, so the first thing I have to do is go to the side and find my common denominator. Okay, so 9, 18. Okay, let's see, 3, 6, 9. Oh, what I do? I found it. It's going to be 9. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. So my new problem is 3 1/9 minus 1 3/9. So now I need to subtract, and I know my denominator is 9, because it doesn't change, right? So now I need to go ahead and find my numerator. Find my numerator. So I'm going to do 1 minus 3. I cannot do that, so I must borrow. So the 3 becomes a 2, and how much did I just borrow? I borrowed a whole. And how many make a whole? 9, because my denominator is 9. So I'm going to add 9 parts to that. Okay? You really could just do it like this, but if it helps you, you can put the 9/9. But as long as you know why you're borrowing, how much you're borrowing. So now I have 10/9 because I had 1/9 and I just borrowed 9/9. So 10 minus 3 is 7. 2 minus 1 is 1. So my answer is 1 7/9. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Actually 2 more, but we're going to do, you're going to love me for this, 9 minus 3 3/8. What? How am I going to write that? How am I even going to write that? Let's see, 9, put your holes with your holes and your parts with your parts, right? 3 3/8. I can't decide to go ahead and put the 3/8 here. Nope, can't do that. Okay. So I want to subtract, but there is nothing for me to take 3/8 away from. I can't take 3/8 away from thin air, so I'm going to have to borrow a whole. Okay, so that's going to become 8. And then I don't have a fraction to have a whole. So I need to decide what could I use for that. I could use 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, 6/6, 7/7, 8/8, 9/9. But if I do any of those, I have to find a common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and use the denominator I have, which is 8. Okay, because I just found it right here, you know. So I'm going to just borrow a whole. That means I borrowed 8/8. Okay, so now can I subtract this? Yes, I know my denominator stays 8, and 8 minus 3 is 5. And then right here, 8 minus 3 is 5. So my answer is 5 5/8. Now you're going to do a problem. You're going to do 9 1/4 minus 2 5/8. So what I want you to do is I want you to press pause and try to solve it. And then once you get it, you're going to unpause and check to make sure that you got it correct. If you got 6 5/8 as your answer, you got it correct. If you did not, well then let's go ahead and explain how we got that answer. So the first thing I had to do was find my common denominator. And ding, 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 I found it right there. It's going to be 8. So my problem is going to be 9 2/8 minus 2 5/8. And I know automatically my denominator is 8. So I need to do 2 minus 5. I cannot take 5 away from 2, so I need to borrow. So that becomes 8, and I borrowed 1 whole, which is 8/8. So now how many 8s do I have? I have 10 8s. So 10 minus 5 is 5. 8 minus 2 is 6. So that is how I got 6 5/8. I hope you feel like a pro at subtracting mixed numbers now.